In our discussion yesterday, our primary focus was on developing ourselves. At the end of the day, you are the unit of change. If we are together as a group and we all decide that we want to move forward, can you ask the group as a whole to move forward? Is that even possible if the individuals do not move forward? If each individual moves forward, automatically the group moves forward. You can never change a group behavior. You will see this as a big mistake that your teachers will make in school. Children keep quiet. They like it when you keep quiet, when you don't think, when you don't speak, you become an automaton so that you become passive. It's easy for them to do nothing. Keep quiet. Children keep quiet. I have been sitting quietly for the last 1 hour. Why are you asking me to keep quiet? It doesn't make sense. And yet it's an attempt to enforce upon the group. Keep quiet, stop, don't move, don't think. But if it was just one person, like just now it was one mobile which was ringing, so you can say one person. That one per child, okay, you're talking too much, you see you're disturbing others. That makes sense. In the same way, in human society, if we want society to grow as a whole, you cannot force society to move. You can assist individuals, encourage individuals to grow and assist them. And when all the individuals grow, automatically society moves forward. Okay? And yet, there is a social structure within which we as individuals tend to fit. And because we fit, we try to conform. Now, this is a very important principle you have to understand. When you're in a group, you look at everybody, and if everybody is silent, you will tend to become silent. If everybody starts getting restless, you will tend to become restless. There's a very interesting experiment. You'll see the video online. And it's an experiment done deliberately. A group of people who were coming to a dentist. They planned it so that the first person was a plant, and the secretary was sitting across, the person who was handling the appointments, and they had a beep going at random intervals. Every time there was a beep, this first person would get up, raise arms and sit down, and the secretary would do the same. So the first person came in for the appointment, saw this happening. At first he said, "What's this? Something weird." And then gradually you can see in the video, he starts getting up and raising his arms. He is conforming to two people who are doing this. They wait for a second person to come. The second person joins. After that, the first person who was a plant goes away. And more people come. Each person coming into the room starts doing this each time there's a beep. And eventually, the plant comes in and asks, "Why are you doing this?" "Oh, everyone's doing it, so I'm also doing." Can you see this behavior in yourself? Do you observe how you yourself do things because everyone is doing it, right? If you go to somebody's house, you see how they are eating, you watch them, and then you repeat the same. So there is actually a group construct into which an individual fits, which shapes your behavior. If you go to a government office, today it's a little better now, they're more clean, but earlier they used to be very dirty, and they would not sweep, and there'll be cobwebs everywhere. You go in and you can see things pell-mell. If you're going to sit there and work there, you will very likely fall into the same groove. Things will be thrown around. You see people, I don't know if you've seen, there are buildings where people will spit. Where people have already spit, more spit will follow. If the building is maintained clean, the same person who has a habit of spitting will not spit anywhere. You don't need a sign that says don't spit, because you've created a group culture, you've created a collective space, a collective mood, a collective formation. This is the key word, formation. And a formation is very powerful because as a formation, it grips us, it grips our mind, it grips our life force. Remember what we discussed yesterday, we are much more first mind and life energy. And if there is a strong formation of life energy or mind and you walk into it, it grips you, shapes your behavior and changes you. This is very important to understand. If you go into a cantonment, a military cantonment, You'll see the grass perfectly mowed, everything freshly painted and clean. You will not walk on the grass. If there's a long route, you will follow the long route. You go to a place where the grass is not maintained, you'll probably walk across the grass. What's the difference? It's not just in the appearance, there's a mood which has been built up. You go to a college where children are not studying, you will tend to slip into their groove. You go to a place where there's a focus of an energy of concentration and study and learning, you will slip into that groove. Have you observed this in yourself? Observe this. Now, if this is happening to you, can you create a similar space that you would like others to flow into? Can you consciously build a formation which will then decide the group behavior? When you go into a crowd and suddenly the crowd starts getting excited, you will notice you also catch the excitement. The crowd starts shouting, you'll notice you'll want to also join in. You come away from there and you ask yourself, why did I do that? And they call this mob psychology. It's a name given, as in science I explained, it's a name given which explains nothing. Why is the mob psychology different? Well, the explanation is this: there is actually a formation of a structure of life force and mind. Now what happens when two individuals are sitting very close together? Remember yesterday we saw there's a boundary which is about this much for all of us. Our boundaries overlap. And if you like each other, if you're comfortable with each other, they start blending into each other. If you dislike each other, you will notice if somebody comes too close and I dislike, my body will lean away. Their body will lean away. We'll be sitting slightly like this. But actually in the aura, this personal space, the life force, you will see the two turn away from each other. But if two people like each other, you'll see the aura turning and even blending to each other. When you came and sat now, you did not think consciously, but you came and sat at a place where you were comfortable with neighbors. As here, I'll give you an interesting study which was done. People coming for the first day of a college gathering. Okay, let's say today was our first day for whatever course you're going to join. You come in and sit down, and they found that the people you sit next to are very likely to become your friends for the rest of the college duration. Why? Not because you sat together. You came together because your energies were aligned. And that's how you become friends. Does that make sense? Do you realize how powerful this operation is? And we are totally unconscious. Okay? So understand that as soon as you enter the room, there's a part within this boundary of your aura which has already sensed energetically the group. And on those inner layers, there's already a pull to a spot which feels right. Because energetically you're close to people with similar vibes. As you walked in, you would have said, where do I want to go? And you don't go by logic, you go by a feel. That feels right. Okay? So there's a whole energetic interaction that takes place in a group where energies begin to blend. Now, as you've been already 2 days together, generally by the third day, the blending becomes very strong. At that point, often the group mentality, the mob mentality begins to kick in. At that point, if there's a strong energy which sweeps the group, the whole group will behave as one. And this is what we call the mob psychology. Okay? It can be built up very rapidly, as happens in various kinds of music programs and all that, and you can see how it works. You have experienced it, the effect on yourself. You start doing things which are uncharacteristic of you. There is therefore not only an individual, there is also family group identity when you get home. And there might be tensions and affinities between individuals. There are groups which you form, which are subgroups like a tribe. I don't know if you've seen in India, we have joint families sometimes with 50, 60 people at a time. When there's a wedding, they all come together. And you feel somehow a connection. And there's a blending which takes place if you have spent a day or two together. You felt that. That's the tribe mentality, we will say, which forms. And then there is a regional group mentality which can form. In a college or a university, there is a collective atmosphere or formation specific to each college and university. And even sometimes you can sense from far before you enter, oh, here people are very studious. Oh, there it's mostly chaotic energy. You can feel the difference. and then there is a national identity. Now, this is fascinating. A national identity also exists in which and of which you are a part, and in which, if there is a culture built up, you are influenced. Even if you have lived all your life elsewhere, when you come and stay there, you'll tend to get pulled into the mood of that. Now, I've skipped one step. There's a city consciousness, city mentality, city formation. Have you ever been to Bombay? You have felt what it's like. You've been to a place like Bangalore. It's very different. Pondicherry is very different. If you go to Bombay, after a while, you'll get sucked into that energy of constant activity and focus on making money. Delhi, the feel is much more political. Calcutta is a very different character altogether. But other cities, I'm speaking of big cities because more likely you would have visited. Those smaller towns have a very different character. Sometimes they're very relaxed, sleepy. If you go to a place which is typically used by tourists on a beach, you will go there and you'll find yourself relaxing and wanting not to do anything. And if at that time you try to work from home on the internet, it's very difficult. You'll find your mind is dull, heavy, or you will say relaxed, but you can't concentrate. It's dispersed. Going to a place, living in a place, tends to make you conform to that formation. Now, all this is to make you conscious of a huge impact that the group has. But also notice, remember, the group is formed by the individuals. Now what I'm describing how the individual is shaped by the group. So very quickly it becomes a self-sustaining group structure. You started with a few individuals. Now you find the group formation which was created becomes self-sustaining. New people who come in get sucked into this formation. Let's say as a startup culture, you're starting with, and as maybe you've read in a startup culture, you have 2 or 3 people, you have 2 or 3 who spend all their time, eat, drink, think only of their mission or their startup project. That enthusiasm, the new people who come, they initially catch. After a while, the number of new people who have come is larger than those who started as a unit, and they come with a baggage. Oh, I'm here for a job. Oh, I'll make more money. And the mood shifts to doing your job rather than making the breakthrough. And these initial startup people get sucked into that mood because that mood is stronger. Unless they have been able to consciously pull you into their culture, which demands effort. So you have a struggle now between 2 cultural value systems. Which one wins decides the future of the company. Inevitably, all these companies which like Google, which became big, once they become big enough, Microsoft, when it became big, it becomes a huge dinosaur. There's a mass, nothing moves. Which is why, I don't know if you saw recently, Microsoft leadership made this observation that they lost out on the AI race because people were working from home. And they lost out the energy of the group coming together and the flexibility and the idealism which drives. It was not just that, the point is they lost that idealism. So this is a complex phenomenon taking place, but you have to understand the group identity and group dynamics. And this is true on a national level also. There is such an identity as an Indian collective identity. You go to another country, you will find yourself behaving differently. You go to a different state within India also, because India is big enough to be like it's a subcontinent, we say. Each state is like a country with a different language, different cultural variations, and you find your behavior changing. Now, what is interesting is there are certain states where you find practically no economic development and great inertia. The same people move to another state and they work very hard and are very effective. Have you experienced this? Have you had this variation going across states? Have you seen people coming from other states behaving differently? You go to their state, they behave differently. Now, this is also, you must understand, we are creatures who are being unconsciously sucked into this mood. But most importantly, there is an ideal which comes with the civilizational formation and the age of the civilization. If you look at the United States, one of the characteristics you see of the American people when they behave as a group And I'm going to make a very general statement, so don't criticize me if you see exceptions, because exceptions exist everywhere. In a very general way, when you see a group of Americans at the airports or other places, they're often like raucous, loud. Suddenly they'll burst out in loud laughter as if nobody exists except them. Okay? They're not conscious of people around. They tend to get carried away with their own enthusiasm. And in the interaction, when you go there, you will see a kind of a, and the mother, so I'll hide behind her observation. She said the American culture, civilization is very young. So they're like teenagers. The civilizational values are like teenagers. Any new fashion that comes, oh, this is the in thing, and we run after it. You go to Europe, it's not the same case. Why? Because Europe's history goes back at least 2,000 years. The United States, as the collective, again I'm saying, the history goes back 200 years, formation of the nation identity. Yes, before you had tribes, but the nation identity was not there. And so that's the youth. There's a certain openness, oh, we can do anything, but it's a bluster of a youth rather than a maturity. Europe, there is a maturity, but there is a weight of the past. We've tried, it's not worked, it's not going to happen. So there's a kind of a cynicism for the future, and particularly it happened after the world wars. India is exceptional in many ways, and I'm going to dwell upon this a little bit because you have to understand what's happening here. Sri Aurobindo observes that every civilization in its collective identity also has a soul. Just as you have a mind, life energy, physical body, and the soul, a civilization also has the body, which is the environment, the earth, the people. But there's a collective life force, there's a collective mind, which I've described till now, but there's also a soul. And the soul of the civilization, as if has an aspiration, if it's conscious, if it's awake, it aspires for something. What we discussed yesterday, your soul has chosen a certain line of development. In childhood, sometimes your parents would have said, oh, you're so talented in music, why don't you spend the rest of your life doing music? And you're capable, perhaps. But you said, no, but I'm interested in that other thing. Why? You're not driven by talent, you're driven by a deeper interest which comes from the soul's choice. And it's the same for a civilization. So Sri Aurobindo observes that in history, when you look at the big sweep of time, every time that a civilization has followed its soul's aspiration, it has grown and it has flowered and it has become strong. Whenever it has deviated from the soul's aspiration, it has lost its way and become weak and has fallen. Now, this is extremely important to understand. And this is also the distinction between national values and aspirations and identities. So he gives a few examples. Let's look at examples from the West. Very likely your history, you were taught more about Europe than about India. So we'll start with, and that's part of the remnant of British colonization. You look at Greece. You must have read a lot of things about how wonderful Greece was, and they will tell you it was the home of democracy. No, it was not. India was the home many thousand years before Greece, but still, for Europe, it was the home of democracy. So we accept it's true for Europe. Now, one of the things you saw there, you would have read of, is the roots of philosophy of thinking. Thinking rationally and philosophy emerging from thought. You must have heard of Plato and Socrates and other names. Do you know of any such thinkers in India? Very likely not. And yet there were far more deep thinkers going back many thousand years you were not told about. But still, that's a different discussion. But what was the characteristic in Greece? You look at the Greek architecture and art, their temples, their concept of gods and what the gods do. And you see all that is molded by a certain idea of aesthetics of form. So Greek architecture will have a certain form and thought, and the focus is on the beauty of the thought. Oh, that's a nice idea. Doesn't matter if it's true. It's a nice idea. Thinking for the sake of thinking. And I think it is Socrates, he goes into marketplace and starts asking questions, triggering people to think. And that's the basis for the Europe of today. But Sri Aurobindo points out it's only one part. There is the other side, which comes from the Roman Empire, the Roman culture. And what is the characteristic of Rome is the organization, the discipline, the structuring, the public works, organizing collective life with great precision and detail. This then blends into the Greek values and forms the European mind of today. So one of the results of this is the focus on external form. So make things beautiful outside. If you see the blend of these two in the forms of architecture, you will see the people with strong muscles where all the veins are distinctly shown, and the thinker will sit like this, and the position and the form and the outer form. And in the same way, the thought in the form of the thought, and then many schools of thought which contradict each other, and you still play with thought. If you go to a course of philosophy, even today in Europe or derived from Europe, even if it's in India, the goal is not to find out what is true. The goal is to play with the thoughts and the variations of thoughts of different schools. So and so thinker said this, so and so thinker said that. But what is true? Doesn't matter. Interesting. You look at now the Hebrew civilization. What are the things which you know from it? 10 commandments. Do this, this is good, that is bad, do not do this. Be loyal to the commandment given to you, or you will be punished. And you see this in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Believe, follow, serve a command, an ideal of ethics and morality. Do not steal somebody else's possession. It's good, but it's ethical and moral, and it stops there. There is not the question going beyond why. What does it matter? Is there a more fundamental truth from which this is derived? No, it stops there. Because that was the need of the civilization and the age then. So all Judaism, Christianity and Islam in that sequence, you will see largely built on such: do good, don't do bad, follow these beliefs, you will be rewarded or you will be punished. It stops there. It does not ask that fundamental question: why? Who are you? How did you happen to come here? Well, there's a story and you just believe it. You are not allowed to question. And they don't like too much of the questioning of the beliefs. And as a result, the beliefs tend to harden and then become ideologies in themselves. We contrast this now with the Japanese culture. And there's something quite extraordinary there. You see, in the civilization, the art and aesthetics and opening to nature, so deep-rooted that even if you're going to share a cup of tea, the tea is made into a ceremonial, beautiful expression and a formality of that beauty. So we are sitting all together, we are going to eat, you have to pause, you don't start until everybody is ready, and then you have to turn to your neighbor to the right and say, "May I offer you a cup of tea?" He already has his cup. You say, "No, thank you." You ask the neighbor to the left, and then you turn your cup properly. You go through the whole ritual, and the whole thing is done with attention to detail of aesthetics, beauty, and art. A kitchen garden is made so beautiful that you don't want to step into it because the stones have been so beautifully arranged. So, and the kimono dress, and you will see in every little detail. It's the only country in the whole world where, when the plants are flowering in spring, the government gives you a holiday so that you can go into nature and admire the beauty of the flowers. Have you ever heard of that? And look at the stupidity of our governments, which want to give you holidays for all kinds of stupid reasons, somebody's birthday or other. Okay, you don't even care whose birthday it is. Beauty of nature, beauty of flowers, and I've seen this because I was there during one of the flowering seasons. This man who seemed to come from perhaps the lowest economic strata, he's sitting in the park and literally is in this immersion in the beauty, gazing at the trees and plants and flowers, just like that. I don't know if you've heard of Narad, you might have met him. He's Matri Mandir's chief gardener that mother appointed. And he was in Japan and shared this experience. He said there was a gardener, traditional gardener, and he was looking after a set of trees, and around one of the trees he had wrapped a certain hay, and he said to Narad, this tree is sick, so we are giving it medicine. Another 20 years and the tree will be wonderfully fine. Have you ever heard of a gardener who's thinking of 20 years ahead? You look at our government maintained parks, they don't care. You've been paid money, you cut, anyhow, you've done your job, take your money, go away. This will not happen in Japan. Because the man is so dedicated to his work, even if he does not get paid, he will go and do his work at the right time and not come home till the work is done. You know, there's a problem in Japan. They're overstressed because if they go home, they finish the work and they go home early, the wife will say, why have you come home early? You are an idle fellow, go and finish your work. So the fellow stays out, waiting for the time and then goes home. That's the culture. You take a taxi, you want to tip the taxi, the man will be insulted. How dare you give me a tip? I have already earned in the amount that's officially mine. Look at the opposite. And in New York, I saw when I did not tip the guy because he misbehaved, took me by a longer route, just to earn extra money. And he said, tip? I said, you already took me by a longer route. He got angry and abused me. So these are, I don't want, thank you. I don't need vendor. These are cultural differences in which when you start living there, you get pulled into it. But think of the time span of the Japanese thought. You are thinking of a generation, 2 generations ahead. I will build this beautiful garden, 3 generations down, people will appreciate it. I will not be there. You can imagine how valuable this can be. This is a fact today that something like 60% of the businesses, companies in Japan are family owned going back 500 years at least. Isn't that amazing? And think of what it means when you're working to build your business or to grow. You're thinking of 3 or 4 generations down. What would you do? How would you behave? And look at today's culture, and you're taught this. If you go, you will be severely mentally damaged if you go through the conventional course of business management, because they tell you to think in terms of the next quarter profits. In the next 3 months, what will be your profit? Based on that, you can destroy the company 2 years down and you don't care. Because you made your profit, you got your heavy pay packet and left the company by the time it has sunk. You see this happening everywhere? That's the culture. Look at the difference in values. I've not yet come to India, but this is a big difference between the East and West, generally speaking. In the East, the turn always has been an inside-out development. In the West, the turn has always been an outside-in change. So Sri Aurobindo makes this very interesting observation that in the West, he was speaking generally of Europe and he was contrasting with India, but he said in the West, generally in Europe, whenever a revolution takes place, you will see enormous changes externally. But internally, nothing much changes. You see the French Revolution, king was overthrown, etc. But the people who took over were as despotic as the previous king that they toppled. And then the revolutionaries themselves got guillotined in the process. What changed at the end of the day? Yes, certain ideals came up, established in the political space, but in the community life, nothing changed. People did not fundamentally change. So he said, there's an outside change, but the inner doesn't change much. In the East, in contrast, and particularly in India, he says, when there's a revolution, there's a massive shift inside. Externally, you don't see much change. But the internal change is massive. And we are nowhere the same. And this you will see, for example, in India in the last 10 years. One of the big changes has happened as a result of mobile phones, of course, but even in terms of values in the last 10 years, something has radically shifted. For the first time, there is a pride in the civilizational values and in the history and culture, which earlier was not there, or it was there, but it was hesitant, it was afraid even to speak up. This has shifted in 10 years. As a result, so many external changes are happening, but even if you don't see it in form, you see it in the content and quality of the shift. And therefore, Sri Aurobindo says, Therefore, now the logic from this we will explore a little later again. Therefore, when once again India becomes the theater of the world's most important events, it will be the sign of the beginning of a new spiritual age. Now, this is happening in a certain way which you are perhaps not yet fully aware of. When the Ukraine war started, Ukraine and Russia, all the big countries who were backing one side or other turned to India and demanded that India take a stance. Why? Interesting. What has India to do with Ukraine or with Russia? But they demanded India take a stance. Why? And what India did actually decided the outcomes of the war. Fascinating. So many reasons. I won't go into the economics of it. There were economic reasons, political reasons, cultural reasons, influential, many reasons. It included food. It included production and distribution of wheat, arms purchase. All these things were involved. But the role India played in all these things was big enough that if the elephant moves, it creates ripples around the earth. But the elephant moves slowly. And so I'm going to come to this part now. What is India's place? India's civilizational aspiration has always been spirituality. Now, the moment I use this word, you have certain images which come to your mind, associations which come. People perhaps wearing ochre robes, walking out from life, going into forests, somebody sitting in a cave withdrawn from the world, or in the Himalayas. No, that's not India's spirituality. It may be a surprise, but that's not India's spirituality. What is the aspiration of the civilization and what is the spirituality? You have to go back to the roots of the civilization which are in the Veda. You will see every tradition in India declares its authority on the basis of the Veda. Without the link to Veda, you are not authentic. You mean nothing. Interestingly. And who among you has read the Veda? Yeah, you have. Wow, one person. That's an achievement already among 100. But you go into the West, you go in any religious tradition, whether it is Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or any Shinto or any other text, every body of the religion has read something of their religion. You come to India and you say, what are you? First you have a problem saying I'm Hindu, because I don't know what that word means. Do you know? It's a big problem. So we had a census about 20 years ago. This guy comes to my house and says, what is your religion? I'm living in the ashram. I don't have any religious forms and I don't have any particular attachment. I said, no religion. Spiritual, no religion. That's one of those things. So he writes down Hindu. By definition, any Indian who is not Christian, Muslim, Sikh, or Jain is Hindu. By definition. What does that mean? I may be following nothing and I'm Hindu. So there's a problem here. Is it a racial term? Is it a cultural term? Is it a religious term? And as a Hindu, I've read no books of Hinduism. What is the book of Hinduism? By the way, there are none, or there are too many. You see, if you're a Christian, you have a Bible and you have read, that makes you Christian. You believe in Christ, that makes you Christian. What is a Hindu? I have so many deities. So the Westerners make fun of it. Oh, you have so many crore gods. No, that's not true. It's a perversion of a truth. The underlying principle of India's spirituality, and we'll come to that a little later, is there is one divine. It's not infinity. It's one divine. We'll come to that later. So what is the spirituality of India, which is so different that we have a problem identifying it, and you don't identify it, and yet you're supposed to be a part of it, right? So it comes with this very deep insight which is in the Veda, and it's always rooted in the Veda. Even though you have not read it, it belongs to you and it's within you. Even if you're participating and practicing any other religious tradition within India, the Vedic influence is strong within you. Because a Muslim in India is fundamentally different from a Muslim in the Middle East, or a Christian in India is fundamentally different from a Christian in Europe. And the difference comes from this influence. What is the distinction of this influence? First of all, in the Vedic tradition, there is the perception that underlying all this which you experience is the one divine reality. I'm going to use words which, don't worry if it doesn't make too much sense, the sense will form. It's real. It's self-existent. It's divine. It's blissful. It's fully conscious. And it exists. There's nothing other than it. There is only that ultimately. This is the underlying reality and the basis of India's spirituality. Therefore, there is no difference between the spirituality and the life. Because all life is sustained by this, is formed of this. World, universe is made of this. There's nothing other than this. Now contrast this with the Judeo-Christian concept which I mentioned yesterday. God made the world and then kind of goes to sleep while the world works out its machinery. Fundamentally different. The world is an expression of that bliss, utterly conscious delight, beauty, love, joy, everything exists as the underlying reality of the world. God is not away, it is in here, inside everything. The beauty of the flower is a leaking out of the beauty of the divine presence. You understand? What you call evolution is nothing but the divine presence which was as if hidden inside matter, now pushing its way and revealing itself, unfolding to become fully awake. So in a very simplified way, one could say, from this perspective, the divine sleeps in matter, wakes up in plants, feels in animals, and thinks in the human being. But it's not yet finished finding its divinity, right? So there has to be one more step beyond the human where you awaken to your full divinity. You see, the sense of evolution is implicit in this idea. So many times they will say, oh, in the West they believe in evolution, in the East there was no evolution. Not true. The evolution exists, but as this awakening of consciousness of the implicit, hidden, real divinity which is everywhere. There is nothing which is not fundamentally divine. But the divinity can conceal itself, can even hide behind an appearance which is the very opposite of it. How will you explain that? Let me give you an example. Let's say you are in a theatre program and you have one of the best actors. Let's pick any name that you would highly respect, and I will pick Amitabh Bachchan. If you, huh? Sorry? Okay. I'm going to pick Amitabh Bachchan just for the, okay. So this guy is there and he's playing out a role in a tragedy. And as the tragedy is unfolding, this man is crying his heart out. Oh, what a disaster, how much I have lost. And as you watch him, you identify with him and you start weeping. And somewhere inside you say, wow, what a performance. And somewhere inside him he says, today's performance was the best. And when you have both finished crying, you get up and start applauding in joy. You see how that works? The suffering, the sadness, the pain, the pathos is a surface part of an experience that you have, and you enjoy the experience as an experience. But you are not suffering. You are enjoying that as a variation of experience. You understand? And this is the experience of you, the true you, the soul within, as it experiences the struggles through life. As you struggle, the surface part says, oh, I am in so much distress, I don't know what will happen. And the soul inside says, wow, what an extraordinary experience, I don't know what will happen. Imagine drawing out here, conquering the situation and overcoming this challenge when nothing is possible, and I'll make it happen. Whoa, what a great adventure. It's similar to what happens when you play a video game. You've all played video games at some time or other. And as you play the video game, oh, what will happen now? You make a leap, you fall, you die. What do? You don't say, oh, I've lost. You say, wow, this I have to overcome. You live again, you start again, you overcome, keep doing until finally I got it. Wow, I achieved. That joy. You understand? You've died many times and yet you have the joy of having grown through it all. That's the inner perspective. But this is also the truth behind the form. The joy which you see, the beauty which you see in the flower is the divine consciousness, so to say, waking up and leaking out. And even if you break the flower, the consciousness inside says, whoa, what kind of experience is that? And it continues to grow through it. Bouncing back again and again. You cannot trample it, it will come back. It will rebuild everything. So the I'm still not describing the full spirituality. The starting point is this concept that the spiritual is the essence of everything. There is nothing which is not spiritual. And the evolution is nothing but the emergence of this spirituality. And then we come back to the question we asked yesterday, why are you here? To fulfill this emergence of your spiritual potential. You too are that which creates the universe, that which becomes the universe. You too have within you the full power of creating and becoming a whole universe to yourself. Think about what that means. And you play in the universe along with others. We are each one universes within the universe. And we are creative beings who will create things which have never been done before. And grow in the process. This is our spirituality emergent. Until we realize that bliss which is our origin here in life, that beauty here in life, that infinity, that eternity here in life. So the goal of this life is to reveal more and more the divine which is hidden behind everything. Now this becoming the base of the civilization, you see something extraordinary. Everything that was done by the civilization aimed at the highest peak. So you look at the philosophies in India, and what do? They are not called philosophies. Philosophy, the word is translated as love of knowledge. So you play with knowledge. No, here it is darshana. The name given is darshana. What is darshana? Vision, experience. So you experience the reality. Wow, this is how I experienced it. And then you articulate what you experience in a way that others also can achieve the same experience. But that experience is not a monotone. It has many facets. So there can be many perceptions of the experience. So we had several darshanas. Then they say Shat darshanas, 6 darshanas. But all of them say you do not know the divine unless you know the divine from all these perspectives at the same time. It's like a diamond with many facets, right? So if you hold the diamond and focus only on one facet and say, oh, I know the diamond. No. You know the whole diamond seen through one window. What about the other windows? And they're each different. But you don't know the whole diamond until you know the whole in yourself. And so even the tradition says, unless you experience the divine in all these different facets and aspects, you have not really experienced the divine. Isn't it? But this is given in philosophies. Now look at the same thing happening in other spaces. In mathematics. Indian mathematics went into integral calculus, differential calculus, many hundreds of years before Newton. By the way, you should know that Indian mathematics greatly influenced European mathematics and was the basis of the European Renaissance. But at that time, the church opposed it. Because one of the arguments the church gave was that if you brought Indian mathematics into Europe, calculations would become so easy and revolutionary and accessible to all that the church control on people's thinking would be lost. This was the argument they gave. And because Indian mathematics finally stood, because the mathematicians in Europe fought for it, that triggered the Renaissance, because now suddenly mathematics and therefore rational thinking was accessible to all. But I'm coming back to how this mathematics went into the infinitesimal and in the infinite and achieved and looked into numbers and saw there the representation of deep spiritual truths and principles. Now here's an example I will give you. Square root of 2. You probably know this. It cannot be represented as a fraction. You cannot take one number, divide by another number and get the value of square root of 2. There is no physical way to represent square root of 2. If you try to represent it with numbers in decimal, it will be 1 point something going on unendingly. You cannot represent it. Isn't that interesting? What is there that exists as an idea which is actually physical reality, because you can measure it, but which cannot be represented physically? What an amazing thing. And then, can you capture the square root of 2 in a formula which is itself infinite and relate it to another number like pi, for example, which is itself again such a transcendental number? Ramanujan did such things. You've heard of Ramanujan? Yes. Oh, he was a genius. No, he was not a genius. He was beyond genius. And I will come to his secret also, because you all have access to that secret. What did he do? He actually created an equation on one side, which is a series which is an infinite addition, and you can never complete the addition. But if you ever could complete it, you would get a number which on the other side is a series which is a divisions, where that is an addition, this is a series which is divisions. And you have no way to prove that this is true, but you can verify with computers going into billions and billions and trillions of calculations, and you verify it's coming true. But there is no mathematical way, conceptual way to prove that this is true. And there are dozens or hundreds of such formulae that he was able to write down. And in his own consciousness verify how, we don't even know. Here's an example of how the spiritual entering the domain of mathematics looks at the world through spiritual eyes. But it's not abandoning the world, it's bringing out a deep truth and representing it and making it expressed. Of course, one of his secret was, he said, I'm given the experience, I see it like a darshana, a vision of the thing, and then I articulate what I'm seeing. So what is he seeing? He's not seeing letters and formulas in the air. He's seeing the experience of what that formula represents. Imagine what that feels like. Isn't that amazing as an experience? Would you like to have that experience? And he would say, the experience is given to me by the goddess. Because he opens his mind. Remember what we discussed yesterday? You open, and from above the intuition comes, the experience comes in the intuition, and you have the darshana. Wow! And then maybe you articulate it, maybe you express it, maybe you play it out, maybe you live it in your heart and in your mind, and you're a different person. It could take many forms. Okay. So even in mathematics, look at the martial arts. You have heard of Kalari Payat, yesterday we mentioned. You've heard of the martial arts in Tamil Nadu, we have Silambu, we have various, each state had its, they were mostly lost. Punjab still has a little bit of its, Assam has a little bit, but mostly they have been lost because we did not value it. But look at Kalari Payat, which had 108 schools of lineage, and only 12 survive. One of which, by the way, is just here next to Pondicherry, next to Auroville, in Auroville actually. There again, the mastery demanded is total mastery of your body to the point where you should be able to control your digestion, interestingly. Why? Because you want to be an instrument for the divine power aspect. And that power should be so effective as to go beyond the biological limits, what we discussed yesterday. The training is to make your body capable of that. And to make it so plastic, you should be able to stand and from standing position leap to a height higher than your head. Isn't that impossible according to physics? And yet they do it. And many others. So one of the weapons, each of the weapons is seen as a representation of a specific aspect of the divine power working in the world. There are weapons which are rigid like a spear. There are weapons which are flexible. A sword which is flexible can swing in chaotic ways, but you are master of the chaos and the enemy cannot manage the chaos. Isn't that an interesting idea? But to experience that mastery is something. I'll give you one more example of that, which is quite exceptional also as a weapon. There's a story of this master of Kalari Payat, and he has a whip next to him, and the entire army of the king comes and challenges him and says, surrender. He says, no. Please go back, otherwise all of you will die. King laughs. Each one has a weapon in the whole army, and this man has just a whip. So he takes out his whip, asks for a little bit of paint, and dips the tip of the whip in the paint. And then he takes the whip and goes, and instantly you see a white mark on the neck of each person. And he says, if my tip has this piece of blade, all of you would be dead now. That's the mastery demonstrated. There are many other demonstrations. I mentioned something yesterday also with the energetics. But you see, the goal there is still spiritual, to realize a divine potential through that art. And the same thing in art, in music, in singing, in instruments. Always the goal was, can you reach a higher experience and then express that and transmit that? So I give an example from the life of Ravi Shankar. Because he was very popular in the West, he was sitting with his Western disciples, and one of them asked, what is special about Indian music? So he said, okay, sit down and close your eyes. And he played something on the sitar. And after he finished, he said, "What did you see?" The fellow said, "I saw the sun rising." And Ravi Shankar said, "I played the raga of dawn." Why? You create a mood and transmit the mood. And your mastery is in the height of the experience that you can reach and transmit. So that in the audience there is an elevation of consciousness and an awakening. Now, it does not have to be always in a particular direction of purity. It can also be in the direction of force, power, drama, intensity. But it is always elevating. You come away a changed person. Okay? This is what makes a master. Now, I was part of a group which was doing some programs for television for a while. And we had done an interview with one of the masters in India, musicians. And we asked him, describe what do you experience when you are singing? And the man says, within me is God. Within the audience, I experience God. Everywhere, I experience the divine presence. I am lost in that. This is the acme. This is mastery. Okay. So you see, in the form of the art, even if you see in the temple architecture, it's not the musculature. There is a certain refinement of a mood, and if you dwell on the face, you experience a shift in consciousness. That's the goal of the art, to give you an experience of the deeper inner reality. And the whole obsession of the civilization was bridging the inner and the outer, because the physical world, matter is the clothing for the spirit. Without the spirit, it is hollow and empty and meaningless. But for the spirit, matter is the means of revealing. Without matter, spirit is unmanifested, unexpressed, incomplete. So the bridging of these two was the basis of the civilization, and the practical result of it was it made India the wealthiest, the most technologically advanced, the most creative, the most organized, with a diversity of approaches. Now, if you go back to the history of Europe 500 years ago, you read Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice. You've read that, but you have not read a Kalidasa. Interesting. Why? Because of the colonial education. Okay, so Merchant of Venice, the hero of the story, suddenly becomes wealthy at the end because his 3 ships return from India. Why? And why is he Merchant of Venice? Because Venice was the closest point in Europe for the ships to come from India. Venice became wealthy because all the transactions with India had to pass through Venice to enter the heartland of Europe. And so they took their taxes and became wealthy. They did nothing. Okay? They were powerful because of the money they had. The Medici, they were called. Okay? But what was the link to India? What was special? And there are many things I will give you. There's a whole discussion I've had about this. You must look it up if it interests you, about the technological prowess. But I'll touch upon 2 things just to give you an idea that this is not just spirituality in abstraction. This is how spirituality affects matter. We had the world's most advanced steel. What is steel? Steel is iron which has been so processed that it has become much more hard. The problem of making it hard is that it becomes brittle. So if you make steel the normal way, you use a steel sword, you hit hard, the sharp edge gets broken. Sharpness goes. It just breaks off, chips off at that end. If you make it too sharp, it chips. If you don't make it too strong, then it's not sharp enough. How can you make it sharp and flexible at the same time? It's impossible, or so you will say. The greatness of Indian steel was it was both. It was sharp, strong to hold sharpness, and flexible. Despite being hit, it could retain and not brittle and crack. We have examples of the iron pillar in Delhi you've heard of. It is iron but doesn't rust. That's just one place of 200 such places. And to this day, we don't know how they did it. So when Alexander came to India, by the way, he was defeated. The story that he won was the story he made up when he went back. It is not true. He was severely defeated. He wanted to conquer the world. The first thing he did to conquer the world, he has to conquer India. Why? Because it's the focal point of the world's wealth. If you can conquer India, you can conquer the world. That's the logic by which he came to India. And all of he was brutal. He was brutal. It was not great. His primary army was of Indian mercenaries. So when it comes to the border of India, they've won all the way. He's on the border of India. The mercenaries say, we will not fight our own people. So Alexander says, all right, you can go back to your people, but you leave behind all your arms. So these mercenaries would travel with family. They had their wives and children. So he said, all of you go without arms. And the moment they leave, he tells his Greek soldiers, if we have to fight these people, we will never win. Go right now and butcher every single one of them. And every single Indian mercenary who had served him and given him all the conquests was brutally massacred along with their wives and children. This is Alexander. Who calls him great? He alone, nobody else. When he fought with Purushottama on the Indian side, he kept losing again and again, and his troops were so tired, they said they revolted against him and wanted to go back. That's when he made friends with Purushottama and said, I need to go back now. And he goes back and on the way sends messages that he's saying, I have won, so I'm coming back. No, he didn't win because he wanted to conquer India. He never conquered India. Purushottama told him generously, you have fought well, I respect you, and here I want to give you a few gifts. So what would you like? And Alexander asks, of course, he's given a little bit of gold and jewelry, which was common in India. He asks for 16 kilograms of Indian steel because that is more valuable than gold. Interesting. So, but India was the hub of world's gold trade and the diamond trade. India was the only producer of diamonds till 1895 or so, when the British found diamond mines in South Africa. To this day, 90% of all diamonds in the world are processed in India. Why? Because this was the hub of the wealth. That's why when the British conquered India, they were able to conquer the world on the strength and the finances from India. In the process, they impoverished India to the point of destruction. When the British took over India, India was producing 27% of global industrial output. Estimates vary from 25 to 27%. Let's say 25. When the British left India, it had been reduced to less than 1%. Why? Because they shut down all the industries. India had the world's largest shipbuilding industries. And the ships we built were so gigantic, they could take 300 people on an ocean-going voyage. And it is these ships which are doing the trade with Europe. And I gave a few instances yesterday. But this is just to tell you that the civilizational strength grew because of its spirituality, which aimed at perfecting and mastering life and technologically bridging these contradictions. That's why I gave the example of steel. Can you make stone which is hard look like lace? You've seen Rajasthani stone windows? They look like lace made of stone. It feels soft. One of the temples, I think it is in Andhra Pradesh, there are 2 towers, all of stone, so built that the stone towers of granite, they swing in the wind. The British tried to figure out how could this happen. They broke the base of one of these and spoiled the mechanism, so that tower is stuck, the other tower still swings. You go to some of the temples in Tamil Nadu, there's an entire pillar of the temple supporting the roof, which is hollowed out inside so perfectly that if you strike it, you have the 7 tones of the sargam, sa re ga ma pa, on the pillars. How do you hollow it out from inside to that precision while it's holding the weight of the roof? We don't know how they did it. This is a reality to this day. You go to the Thanjavur temple, Brihadishwara temple. At the top, there is an 80-ton red granite stone. The nearest quarry for red granite is some 600 kilometers away. How did they drag 80-ton stone and put it at a height of 50 meters or so? We don't know. Because if it was something so difficult, they would have put stone, small pieces, and assembled the pieces on top. Obviously, it was easier to put 80-ton stone on top than to cut it up and assemble it. Right? What was the technology? We don't know. It's a bit like the pyramids and megaliths. Even today, you will see in many of the temples, if you look at the wall carefully, you'll see the line goes like this, like this, like this, across stones, but they fit so precisely you can't put a paper in between. They tell you about the pyramids, but this is true even of our temples built a few hundred years ago. The technology still survived in India. It was lost only recently. And Ayurveda, the knowledge. In Ayurveda, we have such exceptional knowledge that today's science is confirming what Ayurveda has already demonstrated. So I'm coming back to this question. What was the means by which they acquired this extraordinary knowledge? And it was from this opening to the inner, intuitive, and the spiritual, and the attempt to master life. What happened, and this happens post Buddhism, was that with Buddhism came a turn away from life, where they said, Buddha said, here is the suffering. To get out of the suffering, here's the shortest way, which is to get out of life itself, into the nirvana, in the dissolution. And the power of that whole realization, that's the darshana, was so strong that it turned India into an ascetic direction, which said, well, do not forget that in this mastery of the world. And there was a withdrawal. There was Shankaracharya, who came with the effort to literally, he drove off Buddhism from India and reconnected the Indian tradition back to the Veda. But he himself had to say, partially true, that the world as we see it is illusory. Then comes Madhvacharya, who says, yes, it might be illusory, but it is real. And so you have to recognize all this is divine, and so on. Ramanujacharya and others. So all of these, they come one after another to bring back as if, but meanwhile, the turn away towards the ascetic was so strong that the best minds of India began to turn away from life. And this is where Sri Aurobindo says began the downfall of the Indian civilization. The last phase of the last 1,000 years, when you had a series of invasions destroying things, came because the whole civilization had weakened by this turning away from life. And he said, if not for the shock that these attacks brought, India would have become a nation of monks. But the shock of those attacks woke up and said, oh, we have to fight back. And you see, one of the great things which took place, the first renaissance of the aspect of power, was in the awakening of the Sikh tradition, which takes spirituality and the power and unites it against the invasion to protect the civilizational values. And the British did one of the great mischiefs was to divide and separate Sikhism, which was literally the right hand of Sanatana Dharma. It was the warrior strength to protect. Every family gave its eldest son to protect the culture, and they cut it off and separated it. And so these are, I don't go into details here, but for you to understand the reason for the fall, but also the trigger for the rise will be the reconnecting with life, re-embracing life and strength and power and wealth included, because all these are divine. One of the perversions which you see Gandhi promoted in his ascetic turn was saying poverty is good, wealth is bad. Weakness is good, strength is bad. These are the ideals projected by that, I will call it perversion of spirituality. It is not India's civilization. You worship Mahalakshmi, you worship Mahakali, you worship wealth and strength, as well as wisdom, as well as beauty, as well as love and harmony. The three legs of Sanatana Dharma are wisdom or knowledge, strength, without which knowledge is ineffective, and love. And the love which comes on the basis of the recognition that all are one divine, all are expressions or children of the one divine. We are all one in our deepest soul, even though we each have unique, distinctive characteristics. So this is the overall sense of India's spirituality. And in the turn away from that, the civilization fell. In the re-embracing of this, the civilization rises again. As you see, all other civilizations, when they turned away, Greece fell. When they turned away, Japan didn't turn away fully, but it became weak and then recovered, and so on. So this is the phase of India's reawakening by the re-embracing of life, and with it, the love and the beauty and the strength and the wisdom, all aspects of the divine to be expressed in life. So this is the sense of India's spirituality. And I'm coming now to this collective aspect of the national awakening. As we wake up, the national spirit wakes up. As the national spirit wakes up, we all are lifted by her. So I'm going to close with this very important observation of Sri Aurobindo. He says there are two great truths which try to realize themselves in the world. One is the truth of equality, because in the presence of the self, we are all equally the same one divine or children of the one divine, although distinctly unique in each case. The attempt to realize this oneness, you see this equality, you see in communism, where the idea was each one should be equal. But in order to enforce the equality, they took away your freedom. And communism itself became warped, because without freedom, how can you be truly equal? On the other side is the truth of the fact that each one is unique, distinct, and therefore free to follow his unique line of development. And this was attempted to be expressed by capitalism, which said you're free to follow your own line of development. But in practice, capitalism became a loss of equality and a hierarchical subjugation. You become a willing slave to something that you don't like in order to earn the money so that you may do what you like. It doesn't work. So capitalism fails by loss of equality. And the freedom becomes a travesty. It's not a real freedom. And Sri Aurobindo explains these two truths cannot coexist unless there is the third truth which unites them. And that is the truth of a fraternity. The discovery of an underlying sense of oneness, that we are one big family. And when we feel ourselves a one big family, then equality and liberty can coexist. You see these three words where? In the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity. But Sri Aurobindo's observation is it would have been much more effective if they had started with fraternity. Build the deeper fraternity, and liberty and equality will be spontaneous, natural, without conflict. This is also the underlying framework of India's spirituality. Therefore, India's reawakening is essential for the human awakening. Because unless this deeper fraternity of the spirit, of the soul, of the self is realized, you cannot be equal and free at the same time. And you will always find the world split between these two idealisms or ideologies. You understand why India has an important place in the world. And if India has played a leader place in the past, because of this unification of spirit with matter, because of a spirituality which aims to transform life, that role is inevitable, as you can see in the present awakening of India. Therefore, going back to the logic, Sri Aurobindo said, when once again India becomes the theatre of the world's most important events, it will be the sign of the beginning of a new spiritual age for humanity. You understand why Sri Aurobindo fought for India's freedom, I mentioned yesterday? What you have to do today in your own lives, recover your soul, recover your spirit, and bridge it with life. Make your life real and meaningful from what is real and meaningful within you. Live for an ideal which goes beyond your narrow, petty, small interests to something which is so grand that your life is worthwhile in anything that you might do, and the form does not matter. And to assist this comes one very important guideline which you will find perhaps helpful. You see, as I said, each nation has a soul. The soul of India is the Divine Mother, the Divine Shakti, and we call her Mother India, Bharat Mata. She is conscious and she is a divine being. Dedicate yourself to her. Do the work that you do as a service to her. So this was the message Sri Aurobindo gave when the students from Baroda College asked for a message. He wrote this message. He said, when you earn money, earn so that India may become wealthy. When you go strong in strength, become strong so that India may become strong. When you grow in wisdom and knowledge and skill and capacity, serve that Mother India so that she may become full of that wisdom and knowledge and skill capacity. And in this way, by dedicating your life to the greatness of this emerging spirit of Mother India, and she's a mother to the whole world, she embraces all the nations together, you will be serving humanity at the same time. Because unlike other civilizational or national identities which have made the mistake of identifying with the ego of the nation, we are so great, American exceptionalism or German superiority, which became the basis for the wars, etc. The Indian spirit is the soul of the nation, not the ego of the nation. And so serving the soul of the nation allows for that power now as a soul to find oneness of the world and unify the world. It is in this way that Auroville was created. And it could only happen in India. That all the different traditions cultures, nationalities, and civilizations of the world could come together into one place on a spiritual foundation. That's the miniature of unity of humanity. That's where we are today. But it can only happen on a spiritual basis. And this, what Auroville tries to practice here, the whole of India will become at one point. You see, I'm giving you a big picture, linking Auroville with humanity, with the evolution, with your personal life journey, and the civilizational aspiration of India. And remember, when you do this, you have the help of Mother India and the power of this civilization and the effort of all the rishis of the past. Because what we have today is not our doing. If we have today a certain opening to the spiritual and a sensitivity, it's because of the work they have done. And we are children of the rishis, not children of monkeys and apes as we are taught today. We're children of the rishis, we're children of the divine. And the Veda declares, exhorts you to wake up by addressing you as Amritasya Putraha. Listen, hearken, O children of immortality. And the immortality is the divine Satchidananda, of whom we are all children. It reminds you of that. So I come back to this idea. Become conscious of who you are more and more truly, of who you truly are. And you're children of immortality. That is your soul, that is your Atman. That is why you have incarnated, to realize this in life and to make this life divine. This is what the civilization has been doing for at least 10,000 years of its recorded history, and perhaps longer before. And this is what you have chosen to take birth for here, and for humanity, for the world, for the future. So finally, Sri Aurobindo says the future of humanity depends on this. Whether it will follow the ideals and principles of the European civilization or the ideals and principles of the Indian civilization and its spirituality. That will decide what happens to humanity, even whether it survives or destroys itself. And that's why what you do today will matter for all. And this is where I will pause. We don't have much time today, but I want you to think about this deeply. And when we meet day after tomorrow, we will have all the time for questions. Let's take a moment to center ourselves in this aspiration and dedicate our lives to an ideal greater than ours, in service to Mother India, in service to the Divine Mother, and in service to humanity.